Here's a little drawing tutorial about how I would go about drawing this cone. And a couple things. Oftentimes I include the framing box, and I'm going to draw it over here. That's right. I've already done it once. Here's an example. But I think I'm just going to focus in on the actual cone and not worry about the framing so much. I think that's throwing some people off. And there's enough lines going on here as it is. So we'll just keep it at that. But we are going to draw this at the same dimensions over here, where there's a nice, handy, clean area. Oddly enough. So the first thing, first thing I like to do is start really getting a sense for whatever I'm drawing. I try to take in the whole thing, and one of the best ways to take in the whole thing is to start thinking about the outermost points of this object. It's a couple different things that I'm drawing, a cone as well as a shadow shape. And I have, I think of that as the top, the right, and the bottom, and the left. So I'm going to mark the points that are closest to the top of the edge, top of the paper, top edge of the paper, the right edge of the paper, the bottom, and the left. And I think that's a really great way to just sort of start out, because we start getting a sense for this overall thing. And after that, what I am going to do is create a bounding box just around the object. Technically, it's called a notional space. It probably has all sorts of different technical names. But what I'm doing now is I'm just sort of tracing out to where I think the corners would be, and making a little crosshair. And then I'll come in and try to draw a straight line and create a quick little bounding box around this. So that just helps me a whole bunch in knowing what the overall surface area this drawing is going to take up, as well as just start helping me transfer some of the information about this object that I'm drawing. So as we keep sort of moving, advancing, getting more difficult, we'll definitely start learning how to scale things up and scale them down and draw them in different places. But like I've said many times, I love sort of just getting these concepts down in, from a photograph, and removing a few of the many things that we're trying to juggle. I think is a better way to learn. Than just diving in way too much. Anyways, what I'm gonna do as far as this bounding box, I'm gonna just start extending some guidelines over to the area where I'm going to be drawing this. And when we're drawing something to the side of our object, it's pretty easy to get height information because especially if we're going in this one-to-one dimensions. One-to-one meaning I'm not scaling it up or down. When we figure out width information, we're going to use our pencil. But I can tell that that's going to be the height of my drawing just by extending out these guidelines from the bounding box, the notional space. And then I'm going to choose. I'm going to make a little choice here. I'm going to decide. Let's place the left side. We need to place one side of this notional space so that we can figure out how wide it is going to be in our drawing. But that seems a little different in this sort of this one line. We just get to choose. I can elaborate on that more, but as opposed to copying. Hopefully that's not too much of a stretch. Just kind of saying, well, sure. And then what I'm going to do is use my pencil to measure the width of this notional space. Measured a couple different places. And then create a little indicator of where the right edge is going to go. I can clean that up, and I'm going to remove some lines that I have a hunch might be confusing some folks as well, and I'm going to knock back the lines in here as well as here. I will say these sketchy light guidelines that I make, I know I drive some teachers crazy because there's an actual width to them. I'm sort of sketching things out, but I do like keeping things sketchy and a little flexible, a little ambiguous. But it does mean that I need to keep solidifying things as I keep going. Clarifying. So I'm going to measure that one more time here, because partly I felt like I was getting a bit of a different measurement, and it's partly because my guidelines are a little bit kind of loose and sketchy. So it's hard to sort of really take an exact measurement. I think that's okay. I'm going to come a little bit further out than that last one I just made. So there's my notional space bounding box, and then what I want to do is give it the old eyeball test. I like saying that, the old eyeball test, but really leaning back and seeing if indeed it seems like the dimensions and the proportions of this rectangle are the same as the ones I've just drawn. There's a couple different ways to test that, or to help clarify that. The way I'm going to do right now is just to sketch in a diagonal for this box. And then see if I copy that line, excuse me, over on my my new drawing. No small task, but if it seems like these triangles are also making sense in a way that they're the same. And I think it's pretty close. Especially after I can't have 100 tries there, but so I'm going to keep moving forward. So I know that I want to find these points, these 4 points, and transfer them over to my drawing. So once again, the ones that are related to where they are on the vertical are going to be pretty easy to just transfer straight on over. So this is going to be the point where the shadow touches. And this is the left part of the cone, left part of the image, which I can tell is just a little bit kind of there. I'll clean that up a little in a bit. But the tricky ones are going to be points along the horizontal, on how to find those. And when we're doing it just the exact same size as the original, then we can certainly just use direct measuring. About there. When we start scaling up, what I like to do is additionally split up my notional space into quadrants, so that I can really start gauging where these points are in relation to where these midpoints would be. Partly because it's something you can pretty quickly tell, and partly because it's possible to get quite accurate when you're just finding the middle of something by using a pencil like I just did. So if I was sizing this up to something that was going to be, I wanted to say, more like that size. I could pretty accurately figure out how this falls in the left half. It's almost in the middle of the left half. So if I'm sizing up, I can check to see if I have an accurate halfway mark. That one is not. Still not. Partly I'm being too loose and sketchy here. Just a sec. So that's close enough to halfway for now. So then if I wanted to find the halfway of that, I could do that and be pretty confident about whether that was accurate or not, the halfway point. And then I could be pretty confident about knowing where the tip would fall on this on the bigger version. So that's a little foreshadowing. But like I'm saying, when we do it just in this one-to-one, you can just use an exact measurement of the distance from the edge, and then we can grab that. Of course, the same thing is still going to hold true for this, in that if I divide the top in half, I should be able to see where this point is going to fall, and I'm going to nudge it to the left just a bit after doing that. So that's a long blurb on that, and I know that the because it's a cone, I shouldn't say I know. I can be pretty confident that the bottom point is going to be straight down, although I do think this is ever so slightly, seems like it's tilting. When I do the oops. Yeah, that's interesting. Something's going on here. I think this line is not actually vertical, and neither is this one. So as I keep tightening things up, you'll come to a point where something isn't quite right, and you figure out why, and then you clean it up, adjust. So those are the points along the horizontal. And I will say, I also encourage you to start getting into practice of thinking about how these points relate to each other. If I was just going to connect straight lines. This is a little bit different than a technical envelope, but and knowing about how those points, oh, excuse me, that was fun. What the hell was he doing? Oop. I I made this PG, I suppose. I meant to be drawing a line to there. Seeing how my top right and bottom relate to each other is also a really good thing to start just sort of understanding. Both in sort of a perimeter fashion as well as in a diagonal fashion. So diagonal across might be a better word, but it's really helpful to know how this point relates to this point and how this point relates to this point and how that one relates to that, etc. So with that, I think I have all my points in. This guy seems a little low. I'm going to raise him up a bit. So I got those points in. And now I want to decide which shape, what part of this I'm going to really start drawing in earnest. And indeed, I'm going to draw pretty much the only, well, the main thing that's here, which is the cone. So to do that, I'm going to create the cone's own little box, little bounding box, and I'm going to find the point to the farthest right of the cone itself. And that point looks like it's almost midway for the whole bounding box. It's close, but maybe a touch to the right. That would be something like this. So the point over here, which, because it's circular on the bottom, and we know that circles and proportions are ellipses, and these will share several points, but the point here is going to be level with this point. So I can tell the height information for this. Point, but the width information I'm going to measure to transfer that to my new drawing. And hopefully it's not going to be a huge surprise that it should be pretty equidistant, these 2 points, creating an ellipse around the center axis. As well as just like I was saying, we could make sure that it's just slightly to the right of the center line. I still want this guy to be over just a touch, which I'm kind of glad about, because that's going to make more sense about where I just measured that furthest right point. Because if this is halfway, well, it's still pretty darn close. It's possible that I have this messed up. Messed up is a bit of a strong word, but it looks like it's, I'm going to nudge it ever so slightly left. Which will nudge that over ever so slightly, the midpoint. And then the width is going to be just to the right of that. So let me go ahead and block in the cone, because I do have sort of the main points, this dot to dot. And I'm going to do this fairly quickly. A cone, in one sense, is a triangle with a curvy bottom, but well, that was fun to say. But the important thing, well, one of the many important things, is to really remember that it's a circle down here. That's lying flat on a surface, so it's going to be creating an ellipse. And if you just think of this as a triangle, it's too easy to just kind of have a line that's kind of curvy down here, but is not really representing an ellipse. So what I'm going to do on my source over here is really hone in on what this ellipse would be like. I'm gonna try to imagine having a little bit of X-ray vision, as I like to say, but I am going to create sketch in to help me out the long axis and the short axis. As well as the points that the ellipse will go through, and I want to make sure that those are all equidistant from this midpoint here. So from here to here needs to be the same as from here to here. And it doesn't look like it is to me. Let's see. It's close. I'm going to nudge this guy over the center axis on my original. I think that's a little bit more accurate placing of that, and that's going to make it so being in the middle makes a little bit more sense. So let's see, that point, that center point, and that point. So I want to really kind of understand the underlying ellipse that's going on here, because that's just going to help me really start to get a feeling for what is in front here, that when I'm doing this I'm going back around in space. It's gonna help understand where this shadow is as well. And the fact that for an ellipse, it goes along much flatter for this long curve, and then really starts speeding up when it gets to this point, and it never stops at that point. So you're never making a football shape. So that's just sort of all great information to really kind of understand while I'm trying to draw this in. Something is awry going on over here. Maybe not. That's right, that was my center. It seemed like that was a little bit further, which is nice. So I'm gonna try to get a little bit more clear on where all these points are falling. It's hard for me to apparently transfer horizontally in the position I'm in here. You're really kind of up there. You can fuss with that more if you would like. That's plenty of fussing for this demonstration. And kidding aside, I mean, just sort of decide if you would like it to be more exact, or if you're ready to move on. So I'm going to sketch this ellipse over here.